Listen, John, here's what's going to happen. I just want to tell you what's going to happen. We're going to fight a proxy battle with you to take over your board, and we're going to win. So once we take over your board, we're going to fire you, and we're going to fire all management team, in fact. And then we're going to put this company up for the bid of the highest bidder. And there's not an effing thing you can do about it. And then we walked out of the room.
How did that unfold, like the growth journey?
I wouldn't be the man I am today if I hadn't made those mistakes, if I hadn't learned lessons that I needed to learn.
How we create meaning is very important, right? Like our ability to interpret something in a way that actually serves us. What would you say to that?
The real answer is
John, welcome to Ultra Habits. Good morning here from Australia.
RJ, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, for sure, John. It's really a trip having you on the show. When I was a kid, I grew up in San Francisco, and my uncle used to work at your store. I think on Van Ness, and so did my cousins. And yeah, it was yeah, it's really a trip having you on the show.
That would have been our California and Franklin location, which we opened in 1995.
Yeah, he worked there a really long time. Yeah, and, he used to tell me all the celebrities that used to come through. I think Danny Glover was a favorite and, it was a real, I guess, happening place to be, right? Particularly in San Francisco because of the vibe.
Yep. Good to hear.
Yeah. So, John, we're gonna jump into the Whole Foods story, and it's a really interesting, dynamic story, particularly a story of entrepreneurship, philosophy, ethical business. But before we do that, particularly with entrepreneurs, I like to understand like their upbringing. And I know I did some research that your parents were fairly innovative people. Apparently, they had different philosophies. I think your dad was a business person. Like, how did your upbringing and your parents inform who you became?
I grew up in the 50s and 60s in suburban Houston. And my childhood was a lot like what I watched on television, with shows like Leave It to Beaver or Osmond the Harriet or the Brady Bunch. I mean, it was very middle class, working mother, homemaker, kids out playing at the suburbs. Kind of the middle class. So only when I got older did I realize that was a typical childhood of a certain era in a certain country, and not how most people are raised. So my parents, to understand where they came from, they grew up in the 1920s. They were born in the 1920s, grew up during the Great Depression, which had an incredible lasting effect on them. And then when World War II broke out and Pearl Harbor was bombed, my father was 20 years old. And soon after that, he joined the military, and he got married to my mother, and he became after that he went and got an MBA in accounting, and taught accounting at Rice University for my first 19 years. So he was a college professor at an academic university, and then the push came for PhDs, and he didn't want to get one, so he went into business and was very successful there, eventually rising to be a CEO of a of a hospital management company that's publicly traded. He ended up being my mentor because I had no business background whatsoever. My mother was well educated. They both went to Rice University, and that's in school in Texas. And she was really big on education. Her family had a long tradition of women that were college educated. And she named me after her father, John Powell. That's my name, John Tom Mackin. He was a doctor. And my mother really wanted me to be a doctor. And at the very least, she wanted me to be a professional of some kind. And so I always felt that pressure. My dad, I think, who didn't get to follow his own dreams in life, he had to, because of the Depression, because of World War II, because of getting married young, having children young, he just he had to take a job and provide for his family. And very full, people feel very responsible. But I kind of always felt like my dad was I was kind of living out some of my dad's fantasies as an entrepreneur. The life he couldn't choose because he had to choose the life of responsibility. Of course, my mother is totally freaked out that she saw me as downwardly mobile, that I was a grocer and I could have been a doctor. And she died too young just in the Whole Foods really become the success that it was. But I think that's kind of my background. I very attracted early on in age 19 or 20 to the counterculture in all forms and fashions in the United States. Then I definitely became a hippie. I was I was very interested and I I took control of my own education. I started auditing classes. I stopped working to get a degree. I just went to the library and read all day, took classes I was interested in. I felt enough financial security, I guess. It was a time where I was young, and if you took a part time job, if worked dishwasher or busboy or whatever, you could earn enough money in 10 or 15 hours to so it's the kind of lifestyle that I was accustomed to living in as a university student.
Yeah, no, that's really comprehensive, and I think interesting. Like, there's so much in that. You say and you talk about your living out, your dad's wishes and fantasies. I think the interesting point there is also like with women. You said your mom was like super educated, and she came from a long line of educated women. Like in many ways, it's interesting to understand how they felt as kind of Susie homemakers, right? Like a lot of them probably didn't get to live out their ambitions.
He was frustrated. And my sister, though, went on to get a master's in French literature and a PhD in psychology. She lived out my mother's fantasy in a lot of ways, and she worked her whole life, and I was a very strong achiever while doing that, being a good mother as well. She had to. It was double duty.
Yeah, that's interesting. So, you're in this counterculture mode, and I think like obviously you have a grocery, you understand it. Your father's in that space, I think, or he had been in that space. Like,
No, no, my dad was in the hospital management business.
right,
He was
okay.
he was an accountant.
Yeah, for whatever reason, I thought that he had moved into the grocery space, but food is such a big topic in the United States, right? Like the right food, the wrong food, too much, too little. What kind of food should we be eating? Like, how did you get into that space? Like that's pretty innovative, right? Like back then.
When I was about 22 or 23, right around that cusp, I moved into this vegetarian commune, and it, it was near the University of Texas. And I wasn't a vegetarian at that time. I really, but I was interested. I thought I'd meet really interesting people in a vegetarian commune, and there were about 18 of us, about equally split genders, and that was my food awakening. Before then, I was a very picky eater. I didn't eat vegetables really, and I just kind of saw my body as like a car. You buy food that tastes good, and it was just fuel. Like you had to go to the gas pump and fill up and get fuel for the day. And so I've had no consciousness about nutrition or healthy eating, but I got it when I moved into the commune. I I became the food buyer for the co-op. I learned how to cook. I began to read at that time probably dozens and dozens of books about healthy eating and embraced vegetarianism. And then I became a food buyer for I went to work in a natural food store. And I liked retailing and I'd found my higher purpose in life. I was on my path. I'd answered the call of the hero's journey at this point. Particularly when I went and came home from work one day and pitched my girlfriend living in the commune, Renee, about opening up our own store. And she loved the idea. And if she hadn't, I often wonder how my life might have been different. But she was very enthusiastic, and she said, "Let's do it," and so we did. And the adventure was launched.
Like that's interesting. So like you're driven and you had this entrepreneurial drive and you're in a hippie commune. Did you find those two things kind of clash? Like was that hard to reconcile?
But they did eventually clash because Renee and I, first of all, I love living in the, I love, it was called Piranha House. I love living in Piranha House. I learned to meditate there. I had a lot of great friends, always people that I could hang out with, but the whole entrepreneur thing wasn't I'm into. But once Renee and I started work, we started to neglect more and more and more our duties and responsibilities that, I mean, to cook, to clean, to be there, to hang out, because we were so busy working. And eventually we moved out like there, and we ultimately ended up living in the store, which was not legal. It wasn't zoned for that because it was an old house. And on the first floor, it was a vegetarian store and a vegetarian restaurant we had there. So we couldn't do both. So we moved out. We still kept our friends in the commune, but we didn't have the time to do both.
It's well known that you adopted a philosophy of conscious capitalism. Like, was that really a driving ethos early days? And can you maybe for our audience talk a little bit about what that actually is?
I would say it wasn't a driving ethos first of the business because we were didn't know anything about business. And the important thing to understand is Renee and I, we were so young when we started working on the store. I was 23 and she was 19. I mean, my resume goes busboy, washer, boys camp counselor, CEO Whole Foods Market. It's there's no there's not a really good there to explain it. I didn't graduate from college, and so I didn't know what I was doing, and neither did Renee. But I was a fast learner. I've always been a good learner, and when I get interested in something, when I'm passionate about something, I absorb information very, very quickly. I'm not afraid to take chances and make mistakes. I'm not afraid to ask questions. I'm not afraid to change my mind about things when I learn. I also this brought my really close to my father. He became my mentor in business. The first 16 years of the company's history, which is now about a third of the history of the company. I I really didn't make any moves without his big moves that didn't have his approval and I didn't get his advice on. I always like to say I would have driven the Whole Foods Market bus off a cliff multiple times, and my dad had out the wheel and said, "Easy here, son. Let's slow down." That was extremely important. It brought us very close together. Now, as I get in the book, I talk about later on, my father didn't know it at the time, but he had developed Alzheimer's. And before I knew that, flashing a lot, and I asked him to leave the board. And so we had a breakup, but not until I was about 40 years of age.
Were you able to reconcile through
We did.
that? Yeah, okay.
It was very difficult to do, but at the time when I didn't know he had this disease, he was just we having these emotional outbursts. He become increasingly conservative, arguing about everything. And we were a public company at this point, and it was unseemly for us to be screaming at each other in court meetings. And I couldn't understand. He'd gotten really conservative. And at the time, I interpreted it, well, what's happening here is we've gone public, and although my father was well off before Whole Foods went public from his own business success, now he was a lot wealthier. He was also older. And I interpreted at the time, oh, he just doesn't want to lose his money. I really wanted to grow the business. I wanted to go like full steam ahead. I really, and so that's what we were fighting about most of the time, about acquisitions and about how fast to grow. He wanted us to slow down. I wanted to speed up. So I asked him to leave the board, and I told him to sell half of his stock because that would give him all the financial security there life. At the same time, I told him to only sell half of it because we were gonna really grow this company, and he'd be happy that he kept a big stake in the business. In fact, within a year of him leaving the board, we doubled the price of the stock had doubled in price because through our growth, and so we did reconcile. And a year after I got him off the board is when found out he had Alzheimer's. So all of a sudden, everything came. Oh, this was what was going on. This is why we were fighting. And also the company was doing so well. He came and apologized to me and said, you were right. I was wrong. And so we took for the rest of his life until the Alzheimer's really took him. Was very, very. He was the best man at my wedding, for example.
Yeah, that's such a lovely relationship. I've got a son as well, and you know, he listens to me talk about business all the time, and he'll just bring up random business terms, and like, it's great. And we're very different. Like, I would say I'm the kind of cavalier one, and he's already developing a personality of like responsibility. And my wife's like, "Oh, you guys will do good in business together." She's just like, "I just don't want you to run him over." You know what I mean? Because I'm a bit like, and it'd be great to to develop that kind of relationship. I think with my son in a working context, I think that's a very special thing, right?
It can be. My dad was very supportive. I always felt his support. And we would argue about things, but he was very rational until the Alzheimer's came. He was very rational. So if I made a good argument, he would change his mind, or I would change my mind if he made a good argument. So we had that kind of. I guess I probably learned that from him as a boy. We look in our household, we debated a lot, and if you had to be able to defend your point of view, and if you could, then people could change their minds. Which I it took me most of my adult life to figure out most other people aren't that way. Most people do not change their minds, no matter how good your argument is, no matter how many facts you have. Most people just have confirmation bias. But fortunately, I was raised in a family where that was not the case. And so we make rational decisions after having long discussions about it. And the best point of view would tend to win out, or oftentimes you'd have an iteration, right? Ideas we cross pollinate. And I food stuff. My dad too. I always had healthy discussion and debate within our leadership group. Best ideas won, didn't matter who they came from.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think the art of debate is being lost, right?
No, people don't want to listen to anybody else. Their ideological blinders are on.
Yeah, I think particularly in the United States, we're seeing that in the political scene, right? And yeah, it's not great. So this concept though of conscious capitalism, like where and how did it evolve, John, along your journey?
Explain what that is real quickly. Thank you. I'm glad we came back to that. So first of all, it's not an economic system. And that's the first thing I always have to get people to understand, because it's kind of in the US now, it's kind of being politicized, both by the anti capitalist who are using it, how to weaponize it, and but also by the traditional capitalists who are trying to discredit it, because it's not an ideology, it's not an economic philosophy. It really is a business philosophy. It's a management philosophy. It's how we believe it's the best way to manage your business. So once you can get that perspective on, then people can relax a little bit. We're not talking about changing capitalism into something completely different. So there are basically four principles in the philosophy. The first one is every business has this potential to have a higher purpose besides just making money. And it's really, if you think about it, it's just common sense. I mean, doctors make a lot of money, but what is their purpose? They'll heal people, right? Teachers educate, architects design things, engineers construct things. They all have to make money, but the money is the byproduct, the result of creating value for other people. Well, all of business is the same way. Business creates profits by creating value for customers in terms of goods and services. So the higher purpose can be identified by looking at what the value you're creating is for customers and seeing it in this larger context. For example, Whole Foods' higher purpose is to nourish people and the planet. Um, Amazon's higher purpose is to be the Earth's most customer centric business. In other words, we'll put customers first in all interactions. Um, Google's longtime higher purpose, which may have altered now, and has been uh, to organize all the information on the planet and make it easily accessible. So these are the purposes for why the entity exists. Because business, if you go to a party and you just ask somebody randomly at a party, like, what is the purpose of business? They'll look at you as like, what do you mean what the purpose of business is? Everybody knows what it is to make money. But it's not true. And that diminishes business to be just greed and selfishness. The enemies of business wants to say that about it. So anyway, first principle, higher purpose. Secondly, all the stakeholders matter. That doesn't mean they're all equal, but they all matter. So customers matter, employees matter, suppliers matter, investors matter, the community that we're part of matters, and the environment that we're all part of also matters. And when I say that matters, once you see it rightly, a business exists in all these interdependent relationships. So that in a business like Whole Foods, everyone is voluntarily trading with the business. Someone has to trade with it, right? No one's coerced. So customers they have alternatives in the marketplace. If they don't like Whole Foods' prices or our service or the quality of our food, they have plenty of alternatives they can go to. competition helps us to get better. We have to continue to strive to serve our customers better, or our competitors will beat us out. The people that work for us, we're not the only job. We don't have a monopoly on employment. And if we don't pay them well enough or give them enough opportunities for advancement or growth, or they don't like our benefits, they get jobs elsewhere. In fact, every day people are quitting and getting better jobs someplace. So they're working for us because for voluntary, for their own benefit, mutual benefit. Same with suppliers. They don't have to trade with you. Every business is in a network of supplier relationships. And if you try to screw your suppliers, it's probably going to come back and bite you down the road. And then investors, particularly when Whole Foods was public, no one had to own stock in our company. Anybody could buy our stock, but nobody had to buy it. If they didn't like what we were doing, they could always sell the stock. So once you see that business is this relationship of all of these different stakeholders that are kind of connected together, that are interdependent, that are exchanging voluntarily with the business for mutual gain, then you can start to see, as I saw it, it's a system. And you can optimize the total ecosystem, the total business system that Whole Foods is a center of in this particular instance, at a higher level, so that all the stakeholders are better off, that the customers are better off, employees are better off, suppliers are better off, investors are better off, and the communities were part of the better off. This is the grand thing about business that people don't understand, particularly the people that are anti-capitalist do not understand this. They think it's a zero-sum game, whereas somebody like Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk is super wealthy. Clearly, they're just greedy, and they took a bigger piece of this fixed pie, and so somebody else got a smaller piece. No, 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 no. That's completely misunderstanding what business is. It's not this zero-sum game of with a few winners and lots of losers. Instead, everyone's mutually exchanging with the business for mutual gain, and this pie keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger as business spreads, and it's completely changed the world. I mean, the reality is, if 200 years ago, this world was so much worse off than it is today when capitalism only got cranked up. And people just don't know it. They're ignorant. They don't know that 94% of the people alive 200 years ago on the planet lived on less than $2 a day. And 85% lived on less than $1 a day. And that's in today's dollars. They don't know the average lifespan was 30. They don't know illiteracy rates were 88%. It has been science and operationalized through capitalism, the scientific discoveries that's lifted humanity and is continuing to lift humanity out of the dirt into prosperity. Well, conscious capitalism just sees that. It just sees that we can be more conscious about it. And then if we do it in a more conscious way, we can create more value for all of the stakeholders, including the investors. And then, of course, to do that, we also believe you should be a conscious leader. And it's not just about lining your own pockets. That's the third principle. It's about serving the purpose of the business, serving all the stakeholders. And finally, we should create cultures in our business that the humans that are working in the business flourish, that they are learning and growing, that they're happy in their work. And that's what conscious capitalism is: purpose. It's about stakeholders. It's about good leadership, and it's about healthy cultures.
And John, in so many ways, you're like representative of the, I guess, the baby boomer era of like the entrepreneur that went through, your own personal journey, your own personal evolution, and taken a lot of that philosophy into your business. Because I mean, just hearing you speak, like you hold really that complex meeting point of being conscious and communal and aware of your surroundings and being pro capitalist, and you hold those two spaces extremely well, right? And I think that that's super cool to hear. So did you form this philosophy on the back of your like experience pre-entrepreneur? Yeah, pre-entrepreneur.
I don't know about pre-entrepreneur. I early in the book, the whole story, I talk about how Austin had the worst flood it had in 100 years, and Whole Foods was 8 feet underwater. We were wiped out. We were broke, and really in our first year as a Whole Foods market, when we stopped being Safeway, the previous incarnation, and we should have died, but I didn't have the language for it back in 1981, but our stakeholders saved us. Our neighbors came and worked for free to clean up the store. We couldn't make a payroll for our employees. They worked for 30 days on no pay, hoping we'd get open and pay them once we did. Suppliers gave us new inventory. While investors put in more capital. And the best story of all is the bank loaned us $100,000 on my signature, except I only found out about 10 years ago that the bank actually turned the loan down. But the banker, the personal banker, liked Whole Foods Market and me personally so much, he made the loan anyway on his own and personally guaranteed it. That's stakeholders. They care about, they have a stake in the business. They care about, and so that that was just such a wake up call for me, and it formed the, you might say, the framework for later on as I got more sophisticated in my studies and I encountered stakeholder theory from Ed Freeman, that I began to realize, oh my God, that's what I've been doing all along and didn't know it.
It's interesting how sometimes you connect the dots post event, right? Like, and I think like that. I think that is such an important thing that people need to do and reflect on is kind of continually assess, like, and look to connect those dots. And that generally happens after the event, but it's so easy to miss, isn't it? Like if you kind of don't critically think.
I will tell you something. One of the great things about writing this memoir, the whole story, has been I got a lot of dots connected. I looked retrospectively at my whole career and my whole life. And not that I hadn't connected any dots until that point, I'd connected a lot of dots. But being able to look at the whole thing and relive it in a way, it was about almost a 45, 46 year period, reliving it all. I just saw a lot of things. I always tell people now that I finished this book, I said, someday you need to write a memoir. It'll be a gift to your children, it'll be a gift to your grandchildren, but the main gift will be to yourself. You'll understand yourself better because you will connect the dots of your own particular life journey, your own hero's journey. You'll see it in a context you've never seen it before.
And I think you nailed it there, John. Like for me, because of like my personal evolution of being, I'm a recovering addict and it was bad with all the institutions and jails and all that. And like when I got sober, I think the benefit I had was I was acutely aware of this like new narrative that was forming. And I had the benefit of being mentored by business people early days in sobriety that then kind of gave me purpose and meaning. And every so often, I kind of curate that hero's journey. I'm always looking at like my story and I'm like consciously creating that story. And I think that I had the benefit of doing that because I saw like how I was transforming post getting sober through business was making me stronger, better, faster. I got into competitive running and I was like, wow, like this is a process that is can be transferred to other people. And then I learned about the hero's journey, and then I also realized like it's something that you can embark on intentionally, and that you can create and continue to curate as you move along. Right?
Absolutely. So you, in a way, it sounds like you've already done it. Uh, your addiction has proven to be now your ally, and that you've been able to, the learnings that you got from it, uh, equip you now to live a life at a higher level. Uh, and that's, and so in a sense, you've been able to reinterpret it as a gift. And even though it was horrible when you're going through it, you're such a better human being today because of it.
Yeah, I think the way that you worded that was very important. I think you said something like re-equipped myself to see it as a gift, and I think how we create meaning is very important, right? Like our ability to interpret something in a way that actually serves us. What would you say to that?
I totally agree with that. I mean, one of the questions I get asked uh, very frequently, it's meant to be a gotcha question. You could go back and tell your younger self, What would you tell your younger self? In other words, which mistakes will you cop to that I can now write about that? But and I always make a joke about it. Initially, I say, well, my younger self wouldn't have listened to me anyway. So what's the point? But the real answer is I wouldn't change anything because every mistake I made, first of all, it's all worked out wonderfully well for me, right? So, uh, but I wouldn't be the man I am today, the person I am today, if I hadn't made those mistakes. If I hadn't learned lessons that I needed to learn. I grew as a result of those. So those mistakes were instrumental in making me this being that I am today, and I'll take them all, embrace them. And they delayed things, you might say. Maybe I could have gone faster, but then I needed to learn those lessons. I learned them, and then I can move past them.
Would you say you're still a hippie at heart, or has business changed you?
I mean, some of my friends would say that the hippie's still very much in John, and in terms of a lot of the, I'm deep into spirituality, which had its initial when I was younger. That's still very powerful within me. I still really believe in personal freedom. So I see the continuity of it. I see the healthiest part of my younger hippie days is still alive in this older version of myself. But then there are lots of other parts that I outgrew and transcend left behind. So I include some of it and transcended some of it. So I wouldn't say I'm not a hippie in the same way that I was. I kept growing, and so that's part of who I am, but certainly doesn't no longer how I self-identify.
And with the journey of the business, John, like, were you very clear that you guys wanted to list and ultimately sell? Like, how did that unfold? Like the growth journey?
You mean to sell to Amazon? No, that was we did not want to sell to Amazon per se. We were being attacked by shareholder activists, and that was our best solution. I'd much rather Whole Foods go independent company, but Amazon was a good solution for us, and it was by if I had to do it all over again in the same circumstances, I'd make the same decision. But as I like to say, I get asked the question, "Do you regret selling to Amazon?" And the real answer is, I regret that the circumstances made that the best alternative for us.
Yeah, so let's dig into that from a business perspective because I think it's interesting. So, like, how did that unfold in terms of the activist shareholders? Like, why were they attacking the business? Like, what was going on there?
What was going on in the business when they attacked us was go back to like 2007, 2008, when we were in that great recession. Our stock price dropped down. It dropped down 90%. We were selling at 10% of what we were selling a year ago. We were actually selling at three times our cash flow. Could have bought our company and paid for it with our own money in just 3 years. That's how bad it was. We took in some private equity money, friendly private equity money. And then as the economy turned around, our stock took off and it just rocketed up. And at one point, Whole Foods Market was the most, other than Walmart, we were the most valuable food retailer in the United States. We were more valuable, say, than Kroger, although it had 10 times our sales. Our stock got ridiculously overpriced. And then as that happened, our competition of the supermarkets woke up to us in a way they never had before and began to compete. They started copying our product mixes. They started hiring some of our people. They began to make their stores look more like Whole Foods. They started marketing more organic produce. They uh, started to copy us in many ways and underprice us at the same time. So competition got a lot worse. As that happened, the our stock price never should have gotten as high as it did, but then it began to come off of it, began to fall off of its all-time highs. And then that ultimately brought the shareholder activist in and said, "You guys are doing a terrible job because look at your stock today compared to what it was 3 years ago, and obviously management stinks." They did not want to work with us in any cooperative way to make the company better. I met with this particular activist, Jana Partners. I met with them, and they brought this PowerPoint presentation in, which I thought had a lot of inaccuracies in it. But when I asked, no, I don't think a lot of what you said there is true. would you lead? Can I get a copy of that PowerPoint? I'd like to address some of the points that you're making. And they says, no, we're not going to let you do that. And they said, listen, John, here's what's going to happen. I just want to tell you what's going to happen. We're going to fight a proxy battle with you to take over your board, and we're going to win. So once we take over your board, we're going to fire you, and we're going to fire your whole management team, in fact. And then we're going to put this company up for bid to the highest bidder. And there's not an effing thing you can do about it. And then we walked out of the room. So, yeah. So then we had to decide. We hired bankers, we hired attorneys to protect us, to fight a defensive battle. And that was one alternative, to go just try to gut it out with these activists and beat them, keep control of our board, keep control of the company. Because what they really wanted to do is to sell the company. I started asking the question, what's the best strategy? What's the win-win-win strategy? What's the win-win-win alternative that's going to be best for all of our stakeholders, best for our customers, best for our team members, best for our suppliers, best for our investors, best for our communities? And the alternatives that we looked at, besides fighting, were selling the business to somebody that would be hands off, like a Warren Buffett, for example. We contacted Warren, and he joked and he said, well, I own Dairy Queen. I don't think this would be a good fit for brand wise. That's kind of a joke. I just he thought it was a good deal for too expensive. Third, we could have I had a meeting with Albertsons at the potential buy, and I thought, man, that just reinforced to me I don't want this to acquire us. They'll wreck the business.
Oh, what was the issue there, John? Did you think that they just didn't understand what you were doing? They were too big bulks. They were
First thing that scared us, of course, they're all heavily unionized. So we could expect our workforce to become unionized. Secondly, in order to make the deal pay, they would want to cut our headquarters, basically replace everything we're doing in accounting and HR, and a lot of that they just put their own people in, and they just basically get rid of Austin as the headquarters and put those two together. That would be a big savings overhead if it did. And they'd probably understand our mission or philosophy. They'd probably start to make changes from our quality standards, which would ruin the morale of the company. And it was just like, it was like barbarians taking over the companies. They would wreck it. They didn't understand it. Uh, and so the other alternative was going private, which would mean taking in a private equity firm or a couple of firms, and then they would do what's called a bridge loan. They'd borrow 12, 13, 14 billion dollars to buy out the company and then they would get control of the company. And then once they were in control of it, the way the game is played is then they'd go borrow the money from banks based on our balance sheet. And Whole Foods had almost no debt. And so then Whole Foods would be responsible for servicing this debt. And the interest rates would be very high. All of our cash flow would be going to service and debt, more or less. However, if the stock market did well and we were able to go public a few years later at a higher price, they could make billions of dollars on the investment. We pay off the debt. But on the other hand, if you got into the 2008 situation again, we might go bankrupt. And I said, you know what? That's just too big of a risk. I'm not willing to do it. So Amazon ended up being our best solution. And I had met Jeff Bezos about a year before, really liked him, admired the company, thought he was a great entrepreneur. We met with their team. They loved the idea, and they came down. And 6 weeks after our first meeting, we signed a merger agreement and never looked back, really.
why do you think you decided to get into bricks and mortar and grocery? What was the driver?
You have to understand that grocery is a huge category. It's about the biggest category of business. And Amazon really does want to be, they want to be bigger than Walmart. They really do want to be the biggest, best company in the world. And so this was an area where they had their own Amazon Fresh, which they wanted to open. And they have opened a number of bricks and mortar Amazon Fresh stores. And so they wanted to get into bricks and mortar for grocery. And also, like Whole Foods has served this very well. We do returns at all of our stores for Amazon. one of their problems was people don't have to go down to the post office. They can just stop at Whole Foods, and if they're unhappy, you print something out, and we take it back for them, and they needed those kind of outlets. Whole Foods has served Amazon lots of valuable ways that just as we're all around the United States, and we also helped them and the Amazon Fresh to become, because we knew the grocery business, and so they didn't really know it.
I'm pragmatic about these things, and I like Amazon. I think they offer a service that is really, really good. That customer centricity is bang on, but with any company of that scale, there's always controversy.
Let me defend Amazon just briefly here, since this is being recorded. Um, the- when I said it was a win-win-win for each of our stakeholders, I want to make that very explicit how it was a win for every one of Whole Foods Market stakeholders. Let's take our customers first. What Whole Foods mostly needed to do was drop our prices. There was a narrative out there called Whole Paycheck. We were too expensive. We were being undercut by the market. It was very difficult for us to drop our prices. You're selling something for $1 when you have activists. Selling something for $1, now you start selling it for 90 cents. In the short run, your sales are going to drop, your same store sales are going to drop, and your profits are going to drop. In the long run, if you survive, that's a good business strategic decision to do, but very difficult to do, particularly when shareholder activists are trying to take over your business. Amazon allowed Whole Foods to drop its prices 4 times in the first 2 years, significantly. It cost Amazon hundreds of millions of dollars to do that. And they did it because they think long term. That's one thing I love about Jeff Bezos and love about Amazon. They think strategically long term. They're thinking 10, 15, 20 years down the road. They were happy to make that investment. Number two, our team members gained. Not only did nobody get laid off, but Amazon, within 2 months of the deal going through, they raised the pay of every hourly employee in our company. They took the minimum wage back in 2017 to $15 an hour. And of course, everybody else that was on hourly went up, because if you were making 15, 25 before that happened, you had to get the same kind of proportionate pay increase. That also cost Amazon more than $100 million to make that change. So good for our team members. Also, people in our Whole Foods could go to work for Amazon, so they had other career opportunities as well. All of our suppliers get it. Not only did Amazon not drop any of our suppliers, but they studied the sales of every one of our suppliers and picked a lot of them up because they didn't know how good until they saw our sales numbers. So they got that they got oh, hundreds of our suppliers were able to get into Amazon first time as a result of Amazon saying how well they're doing with us. Win for them. Win for our shareholders, because from the time Amazon, the stock sold at 30% more than it would have if Amazon hadn't bought the company. So they got a 30% premium on what the stock was before Amazon got involved. And then our communities gained because the government got hundreds of millions of dollars in taxes paid out. And philanthropically, Amazon supported our foundation. They didn't close them down. They actually helped fund them. That was really good for all of the nonprofit work Whole Foods does, the Whole Planet Foundation. So every one of our stakeholders gained. Now, back to your question. They didn't really take over Whole Foods the way people think about it. They left us pretty independent. Now, that's changed a little bit since I retired almost 2 years ago, because they brought Whole Foods and Amazon Fresh closer together. They're working closer together than they'd been strictly independent while I was the CEO. But now they're getting more integrated together. But culturally, they haven't really tried to change Whole Foods, and so that I really do appreciate about Amazon. They didn't try to turn us into Amazon. But let's face it, they have a big gravitational pull. They're one of the greatest companies in the world, and that pull does have an effect on Whole Foods' culture, even if we have our own unique culture as well.
I think they've done a good job in terms of leveraging scale and size, but keeping you guys independent in terms of the look and the feel and the culture. And you know what, John? At the end of the day, you were able to do a deal, maintain your integrity and your philosophy, and there's always going to be people that are going to have opinions and throw
Not
rocks
perfect.
and whatnot. Yeah, I mean,
I use a metaphor which I think actually is pretty applicable. It's like I joke. I married my daughter. Whole Foods is my daughter. I married her off to the richest man in the world, and uh, has it been a perfect marriage? It hasn't been perfect, but what marriage is perfect? Uh, I mean, I'm very happily married. I like about 99% of the things about my wife. And, 1% bugged me. Uh, but of course, when she first time I said that, she said, "What's the 1%?" But anyway, it's a healthy marriage. It's a good marriage. I'm glad we did it. There's always things that you wish were different, but yeah, take the bad with the good.
So, you've done all these fantastic things in your life. You're a thinker, you're a philosopher, you're into spirituality, you've been a successful business person, a family man. Like, what does life look like for you moving forward? You've written the book. Now, I know you're really community engaged. Like, what's your hero's journey from here? Where are we going?
Well, I started a new business, and it's really a continuation of my hero's journey. Not it's and the new business called Love Life, love.life. Think of it. I mean, we have a telehealth business. We're licensed to do business in all 50 states in the U.S. And we do a lot of international healthcare as well with our doctor network. We have an online coaching business for people that have diabetes or for weight loss. So we're doing those two things. The big thing though is we're opening a flagship location in July 9th in the LA area. And it opens. So it's only, what is it? We're only 3 weeks out from getting that store open. That membership club open. So it's big. It's an old Best Buy. It's 45,000 square feet. We're going to have a healthy restaurant. We're going to have a state of the art fitness center and gym. We'll have yoga. We'll have Pilates included in that. We're going to have a spa, a really good spa. We're going to have all kinds of recovery modalities. I don't know if pickleball's caught on in Australia, but it's in America. And we're going to have 3 indoor pickleball courts. But most importantly, we're going to have this medical center where we are going to try to re-envision the relationship doctors have with patients. Because in the U.S. today, mostly you go see a doctor when you're sick, and we now have the technology. We can get a baseline health for everybody. So if you were a member of Love Life, we'd want to take you through some battery of tests to get a baseline assessment of where you are in your health journey, and then begin to work with you with doctor and with a health coach to develop an individualized precision plan for you to become the healthiest version of yourself, to to find out what your weaknesses are and then begin to systematically address those. We also want to not just do physical health. We're going to be doing emotional and spiritual health as well. So we'll be doing meditation classes. We're doing yoga classes. We'll be doing breath work. I don't know if you're familiar with breath work, but we'll be doing breath work systematically for people. And people ask me, what about a psychedelic therapy? Well, when that's legal in California, we'll be doing that as well. So it's the whole idea is so you have a community of people who are all in a non-cult community of people that share a passion to learn and grow, evolve, to become the healthiest and best version of themselves. And that's what Love Life's about. That's the hero's journey for me continuing. Whole Foods was just the first stage of it.
Now that's amazing. So it's effectively like a health and wellness super center, right? Like everything.
It's a holistic health membership club.
And starting in LA, and then you'll move probably to other key locations
I live
across.
in Austin. People ask me, "Why'd you go to LA instead of Austin?" Well, we looked in Austin. It's the retail's really tough in Austin right now because it's growing so fast. But then I kind of make a joke is that we're also located next to one of Whole Foods Market's most successful stores in Southern California. So I happen to know there's a very good overlap with their customer base with the customers that the members we want to have at Love Life. So I know where all Whole Foods best stores are, so you can expect the Love Life to be close to them or even in the centers where Whole Foods are located if it's possible. But RJ, I always say that there's no place more health oriented in the United States than Los Angeles. It has the education levels, the income levels, and mostly the passion and interest in. Uh, and so if this idea doesn't work in LA, it may not work anywhere else. Better to find that out sooner rather than later.
Yeah, and that's brilliant as well. I have to say, like, the thing about the grocery store is you created a community, right? Like it's a location at the heart of a community, and that community still exists, right? So you can totally leverage that into the health and wellness
So
space,
business or
right?
cost.
Mm. Well, good luck with that. So we're gonna start to land this plane, John. We always ask our guests about their habits, like, reflecting on your life, as I know you have a million billion times. Like, what are some of the just simple habits that you embrace in your life or your business that have really helped you be successful?
Let me just tell you kind of my daily morning routine, and then I mean, when you're an entrepreneur, you're not in routines too much. You're you're traveling a lot. You're doing different things, but kind of at the core is what I try to reserve in my early morning. I go to bed early. I'm usually in bed by 9:30, 10 at the latest, and I do, yeah, it starts with getting good sleep. You don't sleep well. Um, that's foundations for renewing yourself. And then, so I wake up early. I'm going to wake up around 5 or 5:30 on my own. I don't set the alarm. And then I'm going to start out. First, I do spiritual readings, mostly in the Course of Miracles. I've been studying that for 40 years. So I start out with that. Then I go into gratitude exercise. I find that to be incredibly powerful to open the heart. It's, it's very difficult. It's very difficult to stay depressed or in a bad funk if you are practicing gratitude, because it's a heart opener and open a mind opener to some gratitude. Then after that, I do a little prayer, and then I do meditation. And after meditation, I go make a smoothie. Basically, I make a super healthy smoothie that I full Vitamix, 64 ounces. That I have a couple of glasses in the morning, and then I'll have another glass at lunch, another glass at dinner. So those are half vegetables and half fruits. Very, very nutrient dense. I add lots of different things to it. It's kind of the super healthy smoothie. Um, and then I'm going to exercise after I have the smoothie. I'm either going to do, I'm either going to go out for a long walk, I'm going to play pickleball, or I'm going to do yoga. If I don't do yoga in the morning, I'll find some other time to do it later in the day because I really think that's important, particularly as I age. Myself as flexible as possible. I also do Pilates. I really do believe in exercise and movement. So, well, the habits that are important, I think, for myself are first my spiritual practices. I do then my diet and nutrition. That's I'm plant based. I eat a very, very healthy diet. Um, uh, and then it's about getting enough sleep, enough exercise, and then my positive attitude. I really do believe that your mind is where I maintain. My wife has taught me the most important lesson in my life that I try to practice, and I don't practice this perfectly, but she just says, "John, you're making us all too complicated." She told me this a few years ago. It's not as complicated as you think. Just love everyone all the time. It simplifies things. You don't have to worry. I'm going to love RJ, but I'm not going to love Tom. No, you love everyone you encounter. You bring goodwill and good intent to. And if people are nasty to you, well, you breathe and you forgive. And we can. That's the best habit, I think. If I had to get rid of all the habits and keep that one, I'd keep that one habit. I find it to be incredibly positive, and it'll change your life. Quite frankly.
A good friend of mine and mentor, he says, "RJ, your God is goodwill and concern." And you're right. I think, like, if you interface in life and with individuals with that, you can't really go wrong, right?
I don't think you can. And we spend so much time, particularly it's really useful in this world today that's so polarized and people are so angry and so judgmental. There's so much hate that increasingly we need people to awaken to love and begin to share that. Each of us can be sort of a little light under the world, and we can we can have our candle light other candles. But it starts with us practicing forgiveness and practicing, as you say, goodwill, good intent, and basically love to the person we encounter. And I have found that most of the time people reciprocate that. People are your mirror. They mirror back to you the energy that you put out in the world.
Brilliant. So, John, where can people learn more about Love Life in your book and everything? Is there a one-stop shop to find out all things John Mackey?
Yes, you could go to my website, which is johnpmackey.com.
Excellent, and we'll have that in the show notes, all that information will be provided when we air the show. I really want to thank you for your time, John. I really loved having you on the show. It's really fantastic.
RJ, so great to meet you. You're an amazing guy. I wish you the very best. I wish you great happiness and much love in your life.